Hello everybody, it's your non-binary pal E.V.A here, and I have mini characters. Each one I like for various reasons. Some I love dearly and know exactly who they are and what they're about. Some aren't quite as concrete, but I have a solid enough idea for who they are that I don't really need to completely redesign them all that often. What I'm saying is, I don't really have that many characters that I struggle with as far as writing or design. Except for this one. This was Zack. He belongs in a story that I hope to make a comic of in the future called Guardian Angels, a story about the afterlife. Zack was a ghost, which in this story is a phenomenon that happens because the Reapers aren't able to retrieve a recently deceased soul in time and are left to wander in their own weird purgatory-like space. Zack would have been found in a rundown mansion and rescued by the main characters. He would have been the first ghost in the afterlife, and the others had to figure out what to do about that. There was some other stuff he was going to be important for plot-wise, but other than that, he really wouldn't have been all that relevant to the story, other than being the main character's love interest. Personality-wise, he was... well, I never really figured that out. I bounced around between him being really shy and nervous, which is very similar to how the main character was, and him being kind of off-putting and creepy to everyone else, but actually really sweet, then basically just Ricky's personality, and all of these just were not working. I did like this design at first, but after a while, even that became pretty subpar in my eyes. At this point, you might be wondering why I keep using the past tense, and that's because this character was pretty much dead. Again, at some point I took a break from this project for a bit before deciding to revise it a little bit in my head. Admittedly, it wasn't just this character that was giving me a hard time, but also the story as a whole. There was even some versions of the story I had thought of that didn't include Zack at all. More and more it seemed like he was going to be one of my forgotten characters, scrapped completely. That was until one day I was thinking of some short story ideas for fun, and one of them was pretty similar to Guardian Angels. The story involved a very interesting non-binary demon character being paired up with a character similar to Chris, and that's when I knew I had struck gold. I immediately went to make a mood board for them, got out my sketchbook to make some rough drafts, and began working on their actual finished design. And that's how I was able to revive this basically twice dead character into who is now one of my favorites. This is the new Zack, a complete character overall, and I am so excited to talk about them. First, Zack is now non-binary and uses they, he pronouns, and I will be using both when referring to them. I made a mood board using Pinterest, which I know isn't as reliable for a lot of people these days, but as long as you know how to navigate it, it's alright, and made some sketches using these. These actually ended up taking up 3 pages here, and I've been utilizing a technique I picked up from watching Ginger Ninja's videos, using highlighters and being very messy with your sketches. Personally, for me, I like sketching the anatomy with highlighter and using pen to draw the details. This allowed me to explore the design much more freely, and after I finished those, I put them on my computer and used them to create their first rough sheet. I bounced around with some different ideas for their outfit, but I knew I wanted it to be pretty gothy, slightly witchy, and there was a super cute bat-inspired shawl that I saw that was really cute, and I had to include this, but in this design, it's sheer. For their hair, I went with this pretty spiky and ruffled looking hairstyle, a little wavy, with a dark red color scheme, and I had to add a gradient just because, along with a little hair streak, because I like making things more difficult for myself. And yes, when I animate this, I know it's going to be a pain, but it's fine. Actually, I incorporated that red and black color scheme throughout their whole design. Their outfit ended up being this sort of cross top, shorts and long boots, and I gave them these little dangly charms there on their boots inspired by Hua Chang's. I did add in some elements from their old design, his old bangs, eye shape and eye color, and necklace. I'm glad I kept the same eye and necklace color because the green really acts as a good contrast color, which makes sense seeing green is red's complement color, but it's not so much it turns Christmassy. I still will never forgive how Christmas is just ruined red and green as a color palette, and now anytime anything is overly red and green, it's too Christmassy. But anyway, I also added some freckles and a bit of makeup. Altogether, this ended up being a very unique design that I'm very happy with. Okay, yeah, maybe it does seem like a femme version of Crowley from Good Omens, but in my defense, they don't have sunglasses. But I'm still really happy with this design, and you might have noticed the devil wings I added. Despite those, Zack is actually an angel, but we'll talk about that later. After making this rough sheet, I made a couple of things with them. First off, a drawing, and also a sprite. Let's talk about the sprite first. After making the rough sheet, I realized there were some things that I didn't quite like, namely some of the colors. So I drew this full body drawing on my tablet in a pose that I thought suited them. I actually like this process so much that I might start doing this for all of my new designs. The things I changed changed here were their hair color, making it a bit brighter, and some small things in their outfit. Zack is quite short, something that I carried over in their first design, but they have a more chubby body type now, and I think it suits them really well, and they look really cute. Now, let's talk about who they are and what their lore is. So like I said, despite their demonic looking wings, Zack is an angel who lives in this world's version of the afterlife. Before that, Zack lived a relatively normal life with a friend of theirs, but died protecting him from a car wreck. When they entered the afterlife, they had to come to grips with their death through this sort of liminal space that reflects their mind. But after that, they were actually able to come to grips with their true self. Zack lived in a pretty conservative place, and so weren't able to express their gender identity and queerness. But since this version of the afterlife is all about second chances, we get to see the version of Zack here that we know and love in all their queerness. Personality-wise, Zack is very lively and fun, being the bright spot that people need, and are very affectionate and passionate. Although this is their true self, they do have their own dark side due to something that happened when they were visiting the living world that they do not like to talk about and can get very quiet and hide when they aren't feeling well. They also have a tendency to sacrifice themselves for others to an unhealthy amount. And if you're wondering why they look the way they do, when the afterlife gives you your new body, it's usually based on how you died, what's most important, and how you feel about yourself. Aside from those things that the other angels know about, it is a bit of a mystery as to why you can look the way you do and the abilities you have. I can imagine Zack was actually probably freaked out a bit at first, thinking they were a demon too. As to why I designed them this way, in a meta sense, I wanted all the angels to be based off of different flying creatures, and for Zack, that's mainly bats, but also slightly dragons and gargoyles to match their protective personality. I also thought it was pretty ironic how their design is all dark and stuff, but they're actually probably the sweetest and happiest angel there. And yes, they are no longer a ghost, although don't worry, I did decide to give that role to another character, but they do still have the dragon eye necklace. As a bit of a recap as to how those work in this universe, dragon eye necklaces are used to be able to communicate to the dead by giving them physical form and some of their past memories. The necklaces start out as gray but change to the color of the ghost souls when given to them. The necklace are activated with any one of, which is why their necklace is green, but they wear it just as an accessory and was probably given to them by a friend that's looking into all of this. That's it as far as their story and a little extra design info. For this artwork, I had actually planned for it to be a traditional artwork, but changed it last minute since I had a color palette in mind that would work better digitally. And yeah, I challenged myself to draw the head and profile, even though I'm not the best at that. I think it turned out really well here. In fact, I think this whole artwork turned out great. And since Zack's back was facing the camera, I also got to play around with their design more by giving them extra markings, and I even placed an extra eye. Very biblically accurate, angel-y, I know. Why are their markings here darker than their official version? Well, mostly because I thought it would look better here, but I also like to canonize that their markings are darker whenever they're using their powers or in a bit of a darker place mentally, and I'm still working all of that out. The markings are actually supposed to be a representation of how they died, where their bones would have broken from the car wreck, so a little gory, but the colors in this were really fun to render using a bunch of pinks and this fuchsia color for the lighting. As you'll see, I actually did quite a bit of overpainting as well as the underpainting with the same brush. I think this made the lighting more smooth and textured and blended them in a bit more with the background. I had a bit of a hard time with some of the foreground elements like the wispies down on the ground, and for the eye in the background I only loosely rendered it since it would be covered mostly. I'm glad I made this, and it's actually something I want to do with characters I redesign in the future, although there are a lot of my characters that need to upgrade, so I might not get to everyone. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. This is one of the most drastic changes I made to one of my characters yet, but I'm so glad I did. If you want to see more of my characters, you can subscribe and also follow me on Webtoon for my other comics. I'm actually working on an animation that goes a bit more depth into Zack's story, and hopefully I'll be able to make that in a reasonable time. But in the meantime, you can see my other videos, mostly speed paints and also comics, comic-related stuff and character designs, and yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye!